I am Eric Hodel, and I'm here to talk about maximizing productivity. Mostly this is going to be a talk about how I organize myself in order to have more time coding than any particular coding technique, but there are a few of those in here. So this is the list of projects that I have either written, contributed to, or maintained in my 6 years as a Rubyist. And there's over 40 up here, and it breaks down to about 6 or 7 weeks for a project, not including however many releases they've got, because some have one and some have many. So there are two things that I think are incredibly important to my productivity. And the first is to have fun. Almost all my work is open source, and it's all volunteer time. So I'm not getting paid for this. I'm doing it as a leisure activity, and I want to have fun. I don't want to be doing any work. And the second one is whatever, I do what I want. I think the most important part of having fun is doing exactly what I want to do. And if somebody is telling me what to do, it's probably work. It's not going to be something I'm enjoying. I want to have fun. I want to be playing all the time. So the core of what I do is, of course, coding. But before I start on a project, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want to go and look out there and see if maybe there's some project that already does what I want to do, maybe not do exactly what I do. And if I can fix it, that's great. I'll go ahead and try to contribute to that or submit a patch or whatever else needs to be cleaned up. If I can't, then I think it's okay to rewrite. So if I look at it and it's either just too hairy or complicated, then I'll go ahead and rewrite or fork or change it a lot. And I'm not a coding superhero. I wasn't born with any superhuman coding abilities, and I don't have any billions of dollars to spend on fancy high-tech coding toys. I mean, this here is a 3-year-old PowerBook, and I'm still on Tiger. I'm not on the fancy new Leopard yet. So what I have and what I do is, I don't think it's magic. I think anybody can do it. So when I start on a project, I like to be selfish. I mean, since I'm primarily doing this for me, I want to fix my problems first. And in the course of doing that, sometimes I solve other people's problems first, but not every time. So if I'm writing something that really is just not, I don't want to clean up or release, I don't. But I might go and mention on the list, if somebody, on the Ruby talk list, somebody saying, oh, I was trying this, and I say, oh yeah, I wrote some of that. You might want to take a look at this. And so, my job, I think, is to fix my problems, or for me, and then if I'm fixing other people's problems, I hope I'm getting paid for that instead. Also, I want to keep what I'm doing as simple as possible, because my brain isn't very big. So if I have a big problem I want to work on, I break it down into small pieces first. Something I can do in an evening, something I can fit in my head for a couple days. Also, I heavily use you ain't gonna need it. So if it doesn't get me to the next step, I don't implement it. If it's not something that I have to worry about right now, I don't. I put it off till later. So that way I make small incremental steps as I'm writing code. So that allows me to be more efficient, because I'm not going and chasing off all the possible different things that I may end up throwing away had I implemented them. The other one is you ain't going to need it, and they ain't going to ask for it. And I'm not going to try to pronounce it. So, yeah, I guess. Okay, I'll try. Yagni Tagafi. So, I'm invested in my features, and if I work on my features first, there's less complexity in what I do. It's easier to fit in my brain. There's fewer places for me to hide bugs. And really, I don't know if I think somebody wants something, they may really not care about it. So I leave it out, and I release it, and then if somebody really wants that, they'll either submit a feature request or a patch to add that, and then I can add it, and I'll know exactly what is necessary, rather than guessing for other people. And I like to test, and I like to test a lot, because eventually somebody's going to ask for that feature, or they're going to ask me to fix this bug that they found that I missed. So if I write tests, it makes it much easier for other people to go and write that patch. And also, it acts as a groundwork for new features, because it'll remember everything that I thought could have broken. And it'll also remember for other people, because they can just run the test and see everything that I was thinking. They don't have to come and ask me about it, or they don't have to guess. So it really helps myself, and it helps any contributors, because they can easily go and find anything that could go wrong, and they don't have to ask me, and I don't have to remember it. And as I write tests, it eventually starts to become kind of tedious. I mean, you end up with 3 or 4 files, and then you're going and refactoring something on this side over here, and then there's this dependency that makes a couple tests fail on the other side. So you go and fix those, and then it kind of changes to your original refactor. And all this going back and forth, the editor using test unit-n flag and naming files, it just gets really, really tedious, and it ends up acting like work. So instead, I automate that all by using Autotest. And it just lets me go and trust Autotest, because it always goes and watches my failures and goes and switches back and forth between what things I need to fix. So I can just keep going until all my tests pass before I start on to the next thing. So I end up spending less time waiting for stuff to run, because it's just happening automatically, and I get to spend more time in my editor coding. And I like to keep everything in sight. This is what my typical environment looks like. So on the editor side, I have one buffer with code, and then one buffer with the test for whatever thing I'm implementing. I got Autotest there on the top, so that if my failures get to be too long, I can just drag it down to the bottom, and I can see more. And at the bottom there, I've got a terminal, so that if I need to check some RI, or run something to clean up something that I didn't test and clean up correctly, I can go ahead and do that, and it's all just right at my fingertips. Then I got my chat window hidden over here in the gutter, so that I can go and ask online, hey, I was trying this thing out and it didn't work, and what should I look at? And then I also keep SSH keychain, which I think now I guess you don't need in your fancy new Leopard, and so that stores all my passwords, and that's why I don't have to type them in, because that's just wasted time. And then also Spirited Away. So if I'm working on a bug, I go to RubyForge, pull it up in the tracker, and then find the patch, and then I go and start implementing it away. Spirited Away will go ahead and hide away my Safari browser window for me, so it's not cluttering up what I'm looking at. Then when I want it back, I can just go click on it or tab to it. And then eventually, as the project goes, there will be things that I just forget. And Heckle is a tool for self-criticism. So I can go ahead and, if I'm getting through a project and I'm like, well, what are the things that I could have missed? What are the things that I've forgotten? Heckle will go ahead and find them for me. So you've probably heard about it 2 or 3 times. I'll explain it again. So Heckle goes through your code, and it tries to make your tests fail by going and changing what's in the implementation. So it'll change an if to an unless. It'll change a 5 to some random huge number. And if your tests continue to pass with that change, then you've missed a test case. So Heckle can go ahead and find all the places that I've forgotten to look for something, or I skipped over, or was just too lazy to do. And I think what's really, really important is to automate everything you do. So like, for example, Rails has the Rails command line tool that builds you the skeleton, so you don't have to do it. Ho has the so utility that will go ahead and build you a project skeleton with the rake file and the directories and everything. My Sphincter searching package goes into automates all of the common operations into rake tasks for me. And that not only is useful for me because I keep doing these things over and over, but it's also useful for people who are using my package because they will be able to go through and just run the automatic tools already. They don't have to go through the 15 steps it might take to go and set something up. They'll just go and run the automatic task. It'll do it for them, and there's much less likely that I'm going to get a bug or a support request about it. Migrations are the same thing. They let you quickly jump back and forth between different sets of your database. You can test stuff or constructively roll back. And then anything that I'm going to do more than once, I like to automate, just because it's much easier to type a short little command than it is to type a big, long thing or a big, long sequence of things. And of course, since the main thing I want to be doing is coding, I think it's really important to know my editor. It's what I spend all my time doing. So don't just pick any editor. You should know it as intimately as possible and leverage it as much as possible. You should know where the great spots of it are and where the ugly spots of it are, because really it's going to be where you're spending the most time, and so you should really enjoy using it. And pair programming is also really useful because you end up with two people working on the same project and sharing ideas. So you also get somebody who's going to tell you, well, I don't think that looks right, or I don't think that's the right way, or no, you can't do it that way. It keeps me focused on exactly what I want to be doing because there's that little bit of feedback. While it works best when you're sitting right next to the other person, it doesn't have to be that way. Ping pong pairing is a really fun thing to do where one person starts off and they write the simplest test that will get you towards your goal. And they check that into the source control. The next person will go and check that out, and they'll go and start implementing away, and then they'll make the test pass, and then implement the next test to go and send a failure back to the other person. So you can rapidly go and do this back and forth thing that ends up turning into a game of stump your partner. And you get you end up with nice, tight, small solutions that way. So once you've done coding and testing, it's time to prepare to release this out into the world. So I usually wait until near release time to go through and polish my documentation. I'll write RDocs for various things as I'm going along, but really I find it most beneficial to go through and polish everything to make sure that it's all consistent, because you may have refactored things as I'm going along. So in my README, I like to have a quick start guide that's the common and easy setup, and then a synopsis of the capabilities and the features, and then also links to RDoc and RI. So the README should be how you find the rest of the documentation. Also really important is a bug tracker link, because I always have bugs in my code. So with the bug tracker, they can go and easily find a place to file the bug. And then the RDoc, I have the how to use in depth, and what the various methods are supposed to do, and what they return, and how to call them. I also go through before release and set up the bug tracker and make sure I've got all the categories and the groups set up, and I make sure it's set up to email me when people go and file a ticket or update a ticket. So this little bit of organization lets me have other people do work for me of helping organize what my various issues are going to be. And I also deny the ability of anonymous people to report, because if I leave that on, somebody will file a bug anonymously, and then I'll never be able to get any more information out of them, because they're not going back to look at it. But if their email is in there, then I can go and have a dialogue with them if I can't reproduce their bug from the information. And I think the last step before the releasing is to have a review partner go through and beat on your code. There's going to be stuff that I've missed or forgotten, or may not be the prettiest, or something that I should automate. So this just goes through, and you can get out as many potential problems that the general public are going to have before it gets out there. And a good place to find a review partner is at your local Ruby users group. Now, after I've documented and had the bug tracker set up, it's time to release. And I used to do releases manually without Ho. And when I was doing it this way, I'd have to go and do a lot of work. It was actually really, really annoying. It would be, sometimes I would not want to release stuff just because it was so much work. I have to go through and do stuff like make sure all my version numbers were updated, make sure that I'm including the right files in the release, upload the file to RubyForge, and then go and fill out the email and then send that off. And it was all just, there were too many spots that I could make mistakes, and too many spots I did make mistakes, and it just wasn't fun. So now I use Ho to automate all my releases. So it takes care of all the packaging up, uploading to RubyForge, drafting me an email, putting a post on my blog, and it really saves me tons of time, especially if I want to do multiple releases. So this way I can go and do a release now in about 5 minutes from start to finish. Also, I get to release early, and I can release often because my release cycle is so small. So I can go through the bug tracker and take 5 bugs and put them in an afternoon. And then I can do a release that evening, and it's all just that quick. If somebody has the same thing with a bunch of feature requests, I can just pile them on and a release goes out the door. I can also, if I'm adding my own features, I can do small, simple releases so that there's less complexity in the release and fewer places for bugs to hide. So if there is a bug, it's much, much easier to find it if you have a very small set of changes than it is if you have a huge, huge release. And it's really fun to track down a bug, so I'd rather do it in the small set of changes than in a large set. So now that I've done with my releasing, it's time to relax. If I do nothing but write software, I just get really bored and really drained, and I don't want to do it. So once I'm done, usually I'll go out and I'll just do something different. Go out and watch a movie, hang out with a friend, get a video game and play for a while. And I feel much happier by balancing out my life and not coding all the time. So when I'm done relaxing, it's time to go and do some maintenance, because somebody's probably submitted a bug or they've used it and they're like, yeah, I really wish it had this. And, also I always forget something. So, I do all these tests and the readmes and the RDocs and I still forget something. So it's good that I set up the bug tracker, so that way I can get told about it and I can organize all those. So what the bug tracker does is it remembers also all the bug details. And it ends up being a kind of community of frustration where people find all the broken parts, and then they go and complain to each other about it, and then I can help them. Or sometimes I just might be too busy to give feedback. So if two people have the same issue, they may collaborate to write a patch. And since I'm not using my inbox and I'm not using a mailing list, it's much easier for people to go and find the history on these things. The other thing is if two people submit a bug and it both goes, and I'm using my inbox as the bug tracker, those two people don't know about each other. And with a mailing list, you get, one person will submit a bug, you'll go through and fix it and announce it to the list, and then before you release it, the next day someone will come along and like, oh, I had this bug, because they didn't go and search the archives, because those are hard to find. By keeping it in the bug tracker, it's much more accessible to everybody. And really my goal with this organization is to make my maintenance more like weeding and gardening than it is like hacking down 7-foot-tall weeds. So with all this testing and the tracking, I don't have to go and rip that thing out of the ground. Instead, I can just go and tweak here and there. But despite all my efforts, some people just refuse to use the bug tracker. Instead, they'll send me an email with a patch or, hey, I found this problem. Or they'll send it to the mailing list and they're asking, what's up with this? Or they'll go to their blog and they'll say, hey, I couldn't get this to work. And they won't even try. And then there's other people that just go and complain to each other. So I don't know how to find that last set of people, but there are tools you can use to find the first two. For example, Apple Mail has a smart filter, so I can go and say, hey, on Ruby Talk, I want to see all the posts about Memcache. Or I can go and do a Technorati blog search, which is roughly the same thing. I can go through and say, hey, I want to find all the stuff posts on, say, Sphincter. But that ends up being kind of messy because even with Sphincter Rails, it gives you some very strange results. And please, 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 when you do file a bug, be responsible and file a good bug report. You should at least conclude how to reproduce the bug, what steps you went through step by step from start to finish. When you got to the end, what actually happened and what you thought was going to happen, and then which versions of the software you were using and maybe what platform if you were on or what other libraries you had if they're kind of related. And the developer may be busy doing other things. I mean, a lot of the software out there is written by people in their spare time, and they have other things they do in their lives. So be sure to use a working email when you file that bug so that when the developer has time to go and look at it, they can go and write to you if they need extra clarification or they can't quite figure out how you found this bug. So they can go and get feedback from you. And of course, once you're finished with your maintenance, it's time to release it. You need to change the version, and I don't really care what you use, as long as you're consistent across everything you do. What I use is major, minor bug fix. So if there's going to be an API compatibility, I bump the major version. If there's some new features, I do the minor version, and if it's a bug fix, I bump the bug fix version. And by being consistent, it allows me to manage dependencies much easier, and everybody knows what to expect. If they see one piece of software go up, they know what to expect from the rest of them. And as you go through the maintenance cycle and add features and make bug fixes, your software usually grows bigger. And if it grows big enough, it may warrant breaking up into two separate pieces. And usually it lets you know this by something like, this part of the code does one thing, and this part of the code does something entirely different. So, for example, with parse tree, we've broken that up into several packages where the core parse tree contains the parse tree processor, or parse tree and the sec tree processor and unified Ruby. And then we have separate packages like Ruby to C and Ruby to Ruby on top of that, so that we can make changes to the core of parse tree without affecting the rest of it. Same thing with RC REST. I was wrapping a bunch of geocoding libraries. I ended up writing the same thing in each one, so I pulled it out of the bottom. So then I can add features to that, and I don't have to go and update every other API that I've written. And really, this it decreases the support burden. So I can make changes in different packages rather than making changes in different spots. And somebody finds a bug that needs to be fixed, then I have to undo a bunch of work and branch and stuff to make a release. So I think the really hard part about this is after you release and you go through maintenance and then doing it repeatedly over and over. So if you do it wrong, you end up kind of burning out and just getting really tired. So it's important for me to remember that I'm writing the software for me. And I thought it might be useful to somebody else, but that it's open source. So if you have a problem with it, it's okay for you to go and change it and fix it. And while I don't owe people support, it should really be I don't owe them support right this second, because I did go ahead and release it out there. So I kind of imposed upon myself this obligation. So it's okay if I'm too busy to do it right now, but I really want to get around to it eventually. But and in the meantime, the bug tracker will remember stuff for me, and when I get ready to work on something again, I'll go ahead and trickle out a release, or I'll flood out a bunch of releases for related stuff. And since I'm kind of lax about the maintenance and I wait around till I do want to do it, I'm going to get criticism. And I'll admit that I write a lot of crappy software, and I think that's okay. And I think that people complaining about it is okay, because maybe they'll be motivated to fix it or to dig into it and look at it and give me a patch instead of just saying, hey, it's broken, or hey, it doesn't do this thing that I want quite the right way. In the meantime, I try not to worry about it, because the people who are just complaining really aren't helping anybody out. And then for project ideas, which is the other half of inspiration, Hacking Night I found is really useful. It's a place that I can go and I can talk to other Rubyists and say, I was working on this problem and I tried to fix it this way, and then the second way, and then the third way, and then just by maybe talking it out, I might go, oh no, I didn't try it this first way just right, and figuring it out. And then I can also, so that helps me do some work on my projects, and I can also provide that service to other people, because I like the back and forth and communication, I think, really helps. Also, another thing is we go out to dinner before hacking. And in that context, you don't have the code lying around, and you can just talk about various frustrations and get project ideas there. Like, man, I really wish Ruby had this tool. And you can get together with a couple other people and say, oh yeah, we should write that. Another part of that is imitating, other packages. Ruby doesn't have everything that some other languages might have. I wrote Autotest after watching some small talkers show me this class browser with these really pretty little test tubes next to all the methods in it. And as they'd go through and they'd edit their code, the test tubes would go and change color as the test passed or failed. And I thought, wow, that's really great. I mean, that's like instant feedback. I can do that in Ruby. So, well, not as great as Smalltalk does, but I ended up writing Autotest out of that. And but still, I want to avoid the not invented here thing. I want to go and make sure and try and adapt something that exists before I just go off and write my own solution to it. The other place for inspiration is painkillers. what really annoys you about your development environment? What really annoys you about your life? Figure out what that is and fix that. That may not necessarily be a code thing. For example, for Ho was written in response to the pain of all the development, or of all the release cycle, everything you had to double check. I wrote IMAP cleanse to read my email for me. So it goes through my Ruby talk email and says, somebody replied to me, it'll go ahead and flag that message for me. And as the messages go by, it'll automatically delete stuff out of the back of my mailbox that I haven't read yet. So those things were really helpful to me in just automating my life and allowing me to spend more time doing what I wanted instead of wasting time on doing the things I didn't want to do. So in closing, I think the secrets to productivity are to be organized, to eliminate the pain in your life, test so that you're a good citizen and you have a persistent memory about what to fix, automate as much as you can, keep it simple, hack often, do what you want, and have fun. Thank you. Question?
I just had a quick question. Is there a bug tracking software that you recommend?
Is there a bug tracking software that I recommend? I tend to use RubyForge's bug tracker because it's right there and everybody knows to go to RubyForge. I don't particularly have one that I really like.
Okay.
Yes?
That IMAP cleanse thing, is that what you use for replying to like Ruby Gems mailing list and everything?
The IMAP cleanse, so he's asking about what I use IMAP cleanse for. I use IMAP cleanse primarily for Ruby talk. What I find, what my problem was I would go ahead and respond to somebody's message, and with the volume of mail on Ruby talk, there is a lot of stuff there. So it would be, I would respond to a thread, and it would be buried like 15 threads back, and I would have to go and scroll and find remember which threads that I had responded to, and see if somebody had responded to me. And I really found I was wasting a lot of time doing that. So what IMAP Cleanse would do is it goes through, it reads my email inbox, and it says, okay, these are all the messages that you wrote. Let me go and find anybody that has in reply to header that points back to one of your messages and flag that message. So then I can go and just scroll through threads and say, oh yeah, this thread has a flag on it and unread messages. I'll click on that one and read some more. And then I went one step further with mail smart filters, and I said, anything that is unread and has a flag, put it in this folder. So now I have one place I can go and look, and I can say, what messages haven't I responded to yet? I can just click on that folder and go, okay, I want to respond to this or not, and then it'll disappear from that folder. So now I can just go through my email really quickly. Yes?
So a couple questions. So what percentage of your time do you think you spend communicating with people in the community? And then the follow-up question to that is, do you specifically time block for times when you are going to communicate and then times when you're just totally offline?
So how much time do I spend communicating with people in the community, and do I block off times to be silent? I would say that I tend not to do it on a day-to-day basis as far as allocating my time for anything. I tend to do it more on a week-to-week basis. So there may be times where, like last month, I spent a lot of time doing Ruby Gems. And it was really lots of just, writing a lot of code and asking people who had submitted bugs since the last time a release and walk through the tracker had been done, asking them questions and saying, hey, I couldn't reproduce this, or hey, I think I fixed this, can you check it out? And then I find it hard to sustain more than, say, 5 hours of coding a day. So I was working really hard on it, and I was probably doing more like 6 and 7 at that point. So after a couple weeks of that, I got really drained, and my family was doing some vacation stuff, so I wrapped another 5 days on each end, ended up going off for vacation for 2 weeks. And I pretty much was out of communication for that entire time. But I've done similar things where I go through a bunch of releases and then I spend a week off. But I don't do much communication at all. Yes?
Talk a little bit about how you pair programs.
How I pair program. I spend a lot of time working with Ryan Davis, and we've done ping pong pairing next to each other, where we both have, there's one screen, one keyboard, and one of us writes the simplest test that we could possibly get to the next step. And then it's the other person's goal to write the simplest implementation to pass that. So our goal is to write as simple software as we possibly can because it fits in our brain better. And then we go, and then once you're done implementing, you go on to the next, you write the next test. And really it ends up being quite a competition because you want to write the perfect failure for the next one to make them spend the most time working. The other thing we do is just side-by-side review, so that one of us will be working on something where we'll just be coding away, and then the other one will just be running commentary. The other thing we've done at a couple of Seattle RB nights is a thing we like to call coding gangbang. So we give one person a window here, and we make it big on a projector. And they sit there, and the only thing they can do is type what people tell them to do. And the rest of the audience sits there and goes, and they have a window with the test and the implementation, and so they're all ready to go. So they'll just start so people just start yelling stuff out, and then they'll have to type it down as fast as possible. And then of course there's arguments between everybody, and there's just that one person doing all the typing. So that's another thing it's a really fun group activity. Was there a question in the back? Yeah, over here.
Curious, how many hours would you say would you spend in a typical week on your open source projects?
How many hours a week do I spend on open source projects? If I'm really into it, I may spend 8 hours a week. If I'm not, I may spend 3 or 4. It depends a lot on my interest level and what I've been working on and how many bugs have piled up in the bug tracker.
It used to be more, but you've been dealing with burnout from 2 years ago.
Yeah, burnout is just the hardest thing to deal with, and finding an effective solution to keep going is something I'm still working on. But definitely balance helps, and limiting the scope of my work helps a lot. Smaller, simpler changes. I'll go through 2 more before I come back to you.
I don't know if we have. Sorry. I was going to say, I don't know if we have time, but it would be fantastic to watch you and Ryan do some ping pong pairing on screen.
I do not live demo.
It's not a demo, it's your ping ponging. So.
Dave?
Yeah, I don't know if I missed it, but what do you actually do for a living?
Top secret.
Okay.
Yes, next to Dave.
What happened to Robot Co-op?
What happened to Robot Co-op? I left Robot Co-op and worked for Lime for a while, LimeWire. And then I quit in August to take a vacation from everything. And spent a lot of time working on Ruby gems. Spent 2 weeks driving around the kind of west of the Midwest, and took a contract. And so now I have a top secret job.
That ain't New York.
Top secret. There's a question, Bill.
Since you work fairly closely with Ruby core, and you've been reflecting on productivity, do you see any things that would be done differently, maybe more productive over there, or automated, or a need for a tool there, like Matt's was saying he wants a Ruby track?
So
basically, from your perspective, looking at core, is there anything you'd like to tweak based on your reflection?
what would I tweak about Ruby core to make it more efficient? Actually, it's really hard for me to say because I think the biggest problem is the language barrier. I am subscribed to the Ruby dev list, and all of their mail, almost all the mail subjects are in English. So I can know what they're talking about, but I have no idea what they're saying. So I think that makes it incredibly difficult for English-speaking or basically non-Japanese-speaking Rubyists to know what could be fixed or what would be better. As far as, the building Ruby is about as painless as it gets. You download it, you run autoconf, and then or configure, make install. Yeah. Yeah. So it's really hard. It's really hard for me to say what should be changed.
For me, I'm currently the bug triager for the Ruby project on RubyForge, and I know that the core also uses their own bug database separately for stuff to track off of the email list and stuff, good stuff to look at the dev environments. And I would like to see a unification of bugs in any system. It doesn't have to be RubyForge, it doesn't have to be theirs, it could be anything, and actually see more responsiveness from all of the core maintainers on the bugs themselves. Because I know there's been a lack of velocity on 1.8 and bug maintenance on 1.8, and I know that it's frustrating a lot of people in some ways. So,
You think? So he was asking if on Ruby core, it seems to be the preference is to submit a patch or the bug report to the Ruby core mailing list over submitting it to the RubyForge tracker. And he was wondering if how well you think that works.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier for me to submit the bug to the Ruby core directory, just because that my activity is basically maintained.
So Matt uses his email for his bug tracker. Like I don't recommend. But he's Matt, so he gets to do that. Were there any other? Oh, yes.
When you're writing Ruby, do you have like a specific limit on the number of lines each of your methods are?
Do I have a limit on the number of lines that a method of mine will take up? Yes. Let me find the slide. So this editor here is about 26 lines tall, I think. And that's usually my maximum. If I can't fit it in a window, it's probably too long. Sometimes some methods I'll have that are longer than this, but usually they've got some string of text that they're building up, and it's just all in a template. And I use folding to hide those things away. But these guys here, I think this is RubyGem's code, and this test here that you can't read is about that's about 10 lines long, and most of the implementations here are about 10 lines long. So I find that I end up writing writing code that's about 10 lines to 15 lines per method, but I don't have a limit other than if I can't keep it all in my head or on the window, then it's probably too long. Yes?
If you have internal comments about code that doesn't fit in an RDoc, do you put it somewhere else? Do you just throw it right there? Do you put it as a footnote? Give it reference?
What do I do with internal comments? And if I have to write an internal comment, then the code is probably long and needs to be refactored. That might mean that I replace it with a solution that's more clear, or I pull that out into its own method, regardless of how long it is.
Well, what if you want to document sort of your thoughts and coming to that decision? Like, I thought of it this way, but I changed my mind. This is better. Just keep it source control.
If I tried various, what do I do if I tried various things and I don't, and I want to write down why I chose the one I did? Then I will put that on the end of the line there. So there are certain, like in RubyGems, there are certainly places where that's happened, where something has changed to the point where it's definitely good to leave that as a note to future people to look at. And those things, I try to fit them on one line, either extending or next to the line that it's relevant to. But very, very rarely do I say, oh, this block of code does this, or this is the idea behind it. That's unless it's a hack tag or similar. Bill?
If you're talking about productivity, I was just wondering about, say, do you do anything to increase your typing speed? Do you find that important? What kind of key maps do you use? Do you try to stay away from a mouse and always learn shortcuts on the keyboard, that sort of thing?
What do I do to increase my coding speed? So, and as far as keyboards go, I type on QWERTY, not because I think it makes me faster, but because, what? Oh, sorry, yeah, I don't. What am I talking about? I type Dvorak because...
Yay for pair programming.
Yay for pair programming.
But you're home for dinner in half an hour, so...
Yeah, so I type Dvorak because I think it's more comfortable for my fingers and my hands. I don't think I type any faster because of it, and I find I'm spending a lot more time thinking than I am actually coding. So I don't think typing any faster would help me.
Everyone who types Dvorak, raise your hand. Higher.
About 20 of you. So yeah.
Do you have special keycaps, or you just
No.
basically memorize them?
Don't change your key. If you try it, don't change your keyboard. Print it out and put it next to it. Otherwise, you won't learn to touch that. Yeah, I don't think. So one of the benefits, or one of the reasons I wrote Autotest, though, is that I found myself switching between this. I don't even know where my mouse is, but I spend my time switching between the editor and the test window, and then editing the test line to rerun it and going back. And by writing Autotest, I shaved off maybe 2 or 3 seconds, maybe 10 seconds per test run. So that was probably the only thing that I've done to spend more time typing as code. Did I say it again?
Okay, maybe I'll sound like an idiot, but I haven't used Autotest. But the thing that I've always wondered about it is, do you just never save your files when they're in an intermediate state? Because if your syntax isn't correct, all your test will fail.
So when this guy hasn't run Autotest, shame, and is wondering if I save intermediate changes, and I have trained myself not to. Autotest taught me the way. What's that?
It's all about saving.
Well, he's saving every 30 seconds or so.
Yeah.
It's just not saving intermediates.
Right. So the other thing that Autotest does is it convinces you to write test first, so that you write a test and you save it, and that test is going to be small. Like the implementations, my tests can't be more than the size of a window. So I will start out a test, and I will go, okay, I want to test this thing, and I will go and do the setup, and I will put a flunk it. And that's my first thing. So what I want to do is I want to go from nothing to setup to flunk. So when I get to flunk, then I write the first assertion. And then I save everything, and then it goes, and I get another failure. And then I go and implement to make that assertion pass, and I save, and then it runs, and I see if it gets to the flunk again, and I'll go and fill out the rest of the assertions as I go. Save, test. And I go back and forth, and it ends up that I'm saving all the time, but I'm only writing a line of code, or I'm writing 3 lines of code. I think there was one hand in the back. I'll go here again, and then over there.
How do you, since you work on this part-time, how do you sort of like remember from day to day or from the next session where you left off in your code, what you were thinking, and then to continue on?
So how do I continue stuff day to day since I'm working in my spare time primarily? And I do that by keeping what I'm working on into small pieces that I can work on in a day. And if it's going to take, sometimes it will take more than a day, and I just try to squeeze that down as much as possible. The other thing I do sometimes is exploration. So that I'll just play with something for a day, and then I'll throw it away. And then the next day I'll have a better idea of how to implement it. And I can probably do it faster, starting with all the things that didn't work. There was one yes in the back.
How do you go about becoming a better coder for yourself?
How did I become a better coder?
Yeah.
Pair programming. Ryan sat with me and he slapped my fingers every time I did something wrong. Pretty much. Yeah, definitely pairing with someone who was more experienced helped a lot. Test first helped a lot. Coming here to conferences and seeing what other people are doing helped a lot. Disagreeing with what people do helped a lot. It's a lot about finding what you like, finding out what other people like, and figuring out how to reconcile the two to improve what you do. Learning is I think is key. You just have to always be out there to go and find that next thing that you're not doing. And then I also talked about the painkillers. A lot of that was, I don't like this. How can I make it better? Same thing applies to your coding. You're like, well, you come back to something later and you go, I'm working on it and I'm finding I just can't fix it because I don't know what I did. So don't do that again, whatever it was.
A lot of tools to help you be a prolific coder and be able to manage all the projects. Have you done anything programmatically to help improve the efficiency of your life, like paying bills, dating, whatever?
Have I done anything to improve the efficiency of my life? I set up all my bills to pay themselves automatically. So I write myself one check a month for my landlord, and I just told him that he can come in the front door and grab it off the step. And so that makes it, every now and then I forget that, but he doesn't come in again. He's supposed to be the first, and he doesn't come till the 5th, so that's all right. And usually it takes me 3-4 days to remember. And I found the IMAP tools work outside of just the coding arena, because there are other mailing lists I'm on that help a lot with. A lot of like the calendaring stuff that I'd like to do, I've got a crappy old phone and it doesn't really work well. So I don't know. I'm much more non-planning kind of person in the rest of my life, just because I want to have fun doing the rest of the stuff. So I leave it open-ended, and I don't worry about it so much. Is there another one over here somewhere? Oh, here we go.
Why haven't you succumbed to the Emacs peer pressure at CLRB?
Why haven't I succumbed to Emacs peer pressure? Because somebody has to be different. Actually, I was working with Akira last night, and he's a heavy Vim guy, so I don't feel so bad. I thought I saw one go up. Yes?
You've spent a lot of time thinking about the process of how to become a more productive programmer. What are areas you're still working on in terms of not quite satisfied? Areas that when you do this presentation in a year from now, you think you might spend more time working on?
What things do I still have to improve? Do I think I still have to improve on? I still don't do enough testing. It's especially difficult when I'm working on a legacy code base. Like Ryan said yesterday, anything you didn't write is legacy. And Ruby Gems has a lot of code that I didn't write. So there's a lot of stuff that in my Ruby Gems work, a lot of my work has been just testing it so that I can make that one tiny refactor that I need to make. And I think I need a tool in between Heckle, or lighter than Heckle, to help me with that. Pretty much anytime you're working with somebody else's code, it's not going to be the same style as you have, and it's not going to have the same level of whatever as you have. And Heckle is really, really a brute force tool. And if you've been good with the testing, it's kind to you. If you're on somebody else's code base, it may not tell you anything at all. I mean, the code may be so coupled that all heckling gets thwarted because you change one tiny thing over here, and it gets cascaded across the entire code base. And Heckle can't tell you anything about that. And neither can the tests, because they're just not covering enough. So I think that's one tool that I would like to have, and I don't know how to write it yet. Yes?
How do you go about thinking about how you organize your program in advance of writing it?
how do I organize my program in advance of writing it? And I don't organize it in advance of writing it. It's test first is much more important than organization. I go and look at that big problem, and I go, okay, I want to build, like for Ruby Gems is, I want to build a package management system. What does a package management system have? Well, you got something to make the packages, something to install the packages, and something to list the packages or fetch them from online. So I take one of those components, and I go, okay, I'm going to start here, whichever one I think is easiest. I go and take that apart as well until I can get down to what I think one class would be. And then I start testing there. And then eventually that'll grow big enough where I can integrate the next class and start writing it. And then I just grow as it just kind of expands from there. So that way I can go and build a large thing out of many small things. And it working that way keeps the entire code base a lot simpler because since you've built everything without any preconceived notions of how it is, you just decided to fix the first thing. You end up remembering everything into tests. So that way you can, if you find out later that yeah, you really need to reorganize that, it's much easier because you built in the ability to refactor it with all your tests.